it's okay to push yourself and just try. And I think this is probably true for all artists. Chances are you're probably harder on yourself than anybody else would be. So just like figure it out. Like even if it doesn't look how you want it to look yet, like just keep like put yourself out there and see what you can do. I'm Monica Gilles-BringsYellow, and I live here in Missoula. And I have lived here for a few years, and before that I lived on the Flathead Reservation, but I am originally from Great Falls. And so the joke is I didn't grow up on the res, I grew out on the res, I like grew wider. I always took classes and just liked to draw when I was younger. I took a couple classes at U of M just for fun, but I also took soccer and pool, so it wasn't something that I was serious about. I really enjoyed it, but didn't think at the time that I was very good at it. I became a history major because I thought that I was really interested in that and thought I was pretty good at that. But I really didn't paint at all until 2.5 years ago. I went to grad school for my MSW, Master's in Social Work, and I was used to basically going to work all day and then coming home and studying and reading all night. Well, I'm up all night still, I want to do something fun. I want to do something that I enjoy instead of just reading and highlighting and writing papers. And so I was I'm going to teach myself how to paint. I'm going to watch some YouTube videos and I'm going to see what I like and I'm going to just do it because I want to do it. And that's what I started doing. I'm also a pretty chronic insomniac since I was a young kid. So I have extra hours in my day that other people don't have. It was also a way to calm down. Because my day job is being a therapist, and so then it's okay, you have all these really heavy things happening all day, and this is just for me. I really like when things are finally quiet, you don't have any obligations for the day, you can just relax, you can do whatever you want, you can listen to whatever music you want, and nobody else is really awake to bother you. You're just alone in the world. So nighttime is my favorite time. I do not do mornings very well. People know not to talk to me. Even if I've been awake for hours, they're try not to speak to her until after 11. So that's kind of how I just sort of shifted, and then I started doing things that I liked. And people were hey, are you selling that painting? And I was well, yeah, I think I am. If I was selling it, how much would you pay for it, basically? I consider myself a fluid artist, which means I'm using a lot of materials and additives to paint that make it flow and move around. I also recently, in the last 1.5 years or so, started adding resin to my paintings to create layers. So then I describe what I do as a 3D collage, where I've got layers of acrylic paint or ink, and then I've got layers of gold leaf, and then I've got layers of portraits, and it's all in between resin and has resin over the top, which I also paint on. So it's kind of a complicated process. It's a jigsaw puzzle that only I know how to do. I think my favorite part is probably the happy accidents, like Bob Ross says, where sometimes I will have an idea of what I want to do, right? I don't really sketch it out like most people do. I just kind of put things together in my mind. And then sometimes I'll be going with an idea and then all of a sudden something will happen and I'll be oh, but what if we go in this direction? What if we do that? And then I'm oh, this is awesome. This is how it's supposed to be. We'll do that other idea later. I decided to start making bigger paintings. Last year when I did Allez, I had a painting that was a little bit bigger than normal, but it was really this big and it was blown up. And I was well, now that I've dipped my toe into the pond, I want to make the actual size. And so that was, in the last year, that's me pushing myself to figure it out.
What was different in your creation process for Allez the second time?
So much math. Because you have to figure out how much resin you're going to use, how long it's going to take, how much time you have. You have to also cover a larger area, so you have to have more paint. You have to figure out what the ratios are of the paint. There's lots of density and opacity that goes into my style of art, so you have to also figure out like, okay, this color is going to do this, but if I make it too thin, it's just going to make mud. So like just so much math. The bigger you're painting, the more like physically laborious it is what I've noticed. And so that's the big difference, because it's not my little painting that I keep in my lap and I can do whatever I want with. You're like lifting and moving and like reaching and throwing things out of frustration.
How would you describe your work in one word?
One word. History. I'll just do history. Yeah. My background is I'm an Indigenous person. My husband's family is Bitterroot Salish, and so that's why we ended up living on the res for like a really long period of time. I met my husband when I was pretty young. Like we've been together for like 20 years. So I was introduced to his family, and when I was growing up in Great Falls, I felt pretty isolated culturally, just like living in Great Falls. I didn't have any family that lived by me. And so when I was introduced to my husband and his family, it was like a very, like, my eyes were open to this like great, fantastic Salish tradition. His family is pretty traditional in terms of like the ceremonies that they have and things like that. And so I started hearing stories about their ancestors and like different people and different things that have happened, even like, oh, our great-great-great-grandfather is buried up there in the Bitterroot, you know, if you go up that road and that mountain, et cetera, et cetera. And so I like have always just been interested in Native history, you know, being an Indigenous person. And so I was like, yeah, I want to put some portraits of important people in our lives in my painting. Tons of research, but I also like did it before, so it like just kind of like folds in to like what I do, because I always want to be like really mindful and cognizant of who the people are, and I'm also like pretty curious, just like naturally. You know, I'll see a picture and I'm like, well, why does this exist? What's the importance of these two people? What's going on here? And so then it's like trying to research and figure out like, okay, somebody's in a photograph for a reason, and now I have to figure out why. So I'm just like solving the puzzle again. I almost exclusively draw Indigenous people from different tribes, and I want to do it in a respectful way. So they usually are either family or ancestors or extended family, or there's somebody that I have a connection with or know some information about, because a lot of time, especially in Western art, it becomes, I don't know, a little bit exploitive, it feels, where people will draw pictures of Native people, but they have no idea who they are, what tribe they're from, what their like significance is. And that's all the things I want to know, right? Like I'm up at like 1 a.m. like trying to break into UM's archives to figure out why this picture exists and who these people are and how they fit in to like society now. The other thing that I get to do, and this is really cool, is that his family, like they have photographs of their family. And so I'm like the family artist, and so they'll talk with me, and then I get to make paintings for his family of like their grandmother, you know, their cousin, that sort of thing. And that to me is really special, and that's what I really like doing. You know, like historical pictures are fun and they're awesome, but I also like just making those like intimate, you know, things that I know that they're gonna just love. I think success as an artist, I think it's to make the art that you want to make and how you want to make it. Another thing that's success of an artist is like when your community says good job, right? When the people that you're making art for or to honor are like, you did it. And you're like, yeah, that's what I wanted. Like if an elder woman from Arley tells me that's amazing, you did great, I'm like, yes, in. So for this idea, the theme of witness, I wanted to find like a photograph or a portrait that I thought showed different cultures interacting with each other. and holding space for each other. So it came down to this photograph, which is Frances Dunsmore, who is, I think she's playing a recording of a Blackfeet song for Mountain Chief, and he's gonna sign language it. And I thought that it had a lot of other themes that went into it. She actually went around, she's an ethnomusicologist, and she went around the United States in like the 1910s or so, and she's recording Native American songs. And they are quite possibly the first human voice recordings in the world. And so she's recording those songs and finding, I think, prominent people in various tribes. They're all in the Library of Congress now. But I thought that was really interesting. And then I started thinking about why that was occurring. And my guess is because at that time, there was this whole idea of like, well, kill the Indian, save the man, right? And so they, like, the dominant society of the United States is basically saying, like, we think that Native Americans are going to die out, and they also kind of wiped their hands of, like, why that is, you know? And so even the ones that don't die out, we are going to basically eradicate their culture. So they are, you know, essentially like white people with fabulous tans, right? That was kind of the goal, which is a horrifying goal, right? Because it's like, it's basically genocide. It is genocide. So there was also that push on the other side of like, well, if they are wiped out, if like we kill all of these people or that we change it so that their culture is illegal, then we won't have any songs anymore. So then there's also a rush to preserve the culture while it's still there. So that's what she's doing. And Mountain Chief is in it because he's really prominent. His dad is one of the last chief of the Blackfeet, and his family was somewhat involved in the Baker massacre, to where there's two stories for why this happens. One story is, so Frank Mountain Chief has a brother who's Owl Child, and Owl Child is somehow whipped by a local rancher. And in his revenge, Owl Child kills that rancher, right? Or like whatever happened. I don't know what the situation is. The other story, which is also still horrifying, is that they have a sister, and the sister was raped by a local rancher. And so Owl Child then kills the rancher. But the outcome's basically the same no matter what caused that, whatever horrifying one you pick. The settlers in the area, and especially back in Helena, find out that a Blackfeet person has killed a white rancher, and they're like, well, we got to mount the troops up and take care of this, right? They cannot get away with this. So they do that, and under Colonel Baker, they send out a dispatch to basically attack Mountain Chief's band, because they're like renegades, right? So they're like, we got to calm this insurrection. And they don't find Mountain Chief's band because maybe he like figured out that they were coming and moved up the Marias River. But what they do find is they find Heavy Runner's band. And so they attack Heavy Runner's band even though they knew it was the wrong band. And Heavy Runner's band was peaceful, had complied with the US government, had medals of commendation, that sort of thing. Heavy Runner tries to go out and like, you know, lift his medals, lift the flag, lift the paperwork, that sort of thing. And he's the first person that's shot. The other thing that makes it even more horrifying is that there wasn't really any men there. They had gone like on a hunting party, so it's mostly women and children. So that's the Baker massacre, but that's also the importance of why I think Mountain Chief is in the recordings. And the reason I know about the Baker massacre, because they don't teach it in schools, is one, my family, but also my cousins live up by Shelby. And so in order to go visit my cousins, I had to cross the historical marker on the river where they say this is the Marias massacre. And it says all of that information. So I made a really pretty painting to tell you a really horrifying story. I think art should be accessible to everybody, right? It shouldn't just be like you only get beautiful things and get to see, you know, wonderful images if you have a certain income bracket, right? I think everybody needs art. It's a way for people to express themselves. I think it's important also to have public art because art tells us stories about ourselves, right? And tells a narrative about who we are, where we come from, and what does it mean to be in this community. So it kind of like is reflecting back at itself. And I think it's important to include reflections of all different types of people.